Hi, and welcome to a special episode of our Experiencing Consciousness podcast. We are
Roxanna Erickson,
Catherine Rossi,
and I'm Jan Lipa.
We are so happy you are here.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of our podcast. Today we are here with Dr. Catherine Rossi and Dr. Roxanna Erickson-Klein. And till now we did a podcast on the general frame of addictions, and we addressed the topic of smoking cessation and alcohol abuse. And now there comes a time to ask a question about the use of hypnosis in the treatment of substance addictions, substance abuse. So is there any general frame, or is it something more to that? Where to start that topic?
Well, I've always got ideas to start. And my general starting place with individuals is, of course, to develop a trusting relationship, which, sometimes you can do that in one session, sometimes it takes longer. But one of the fundamentals is, what are they there for? And I take the position that I am there to serve the client. And then the next thing, the next kind of truism that I like to make a point of as early as possible is that nobody wakes up in the morning, and decides, well, I want to, be a substance abuser. That's something that kind of creeps up over time, and it has a tendency to find its way into individuals' lives because it's doing something for them. So I always start with a solid foundation of what does this individual believe that they were getting out of using the substance. Why did it appeal to them? What did they like about it? I want to hear all of what they consider to be the best parts of using the substance. And for me, so I ask a lot of questions in that area, which then I will use as a foundation for hypnotic work that I do, in making the adjustment to minimizing or eliminating the use of the substance from their life. But I want to know what they consider to be benefits, the desirable aspects, the fun parts, I'm asking a lot of questions about that.
How do you then utilize that in a treatment with using hypnosis?
Well, in the beginning, it was just to get a better understanding. There's two things. One is I get a better understanding of what I'm dealing with, and two, I think it usually facilitates the rapport because often these individuals have been browbeat with, you're doing such terrible thing, it's hurting your body, it's hurting you, it's hurting your relationship, all these negative, and it kind of turns the table and lets them be open about the things that haven't been fully expressed. But in truth, I'm gathering fodder for what I'm going to use in my hypnosis interventions a little bit later on.
Okay.
That's exactly right. And it's in gathering words that are important to that client. And you can tell when someone's using a word that's important to them. And that's when I make notes of like specific words that I know that they relate to. So when it comes time to do hypnosis, that might be a formal induction. It's, with me, it's generally kind of informal, going into talking and minimal cues, and when I see that the person is entering into a trance naturally. But one of the first issues that comes up is, what is their expectation of hypnosis? If their expectation of hypnosis is, doctor, you're going to cure me, then that has to be addressed. Is that that's what they do maybe in the movies, but you're actually going to be the one that's responsible for your changes, and I'm here to help to facilitate that within you. And when you go into certain states of mind within the course of a session, you're more likely to be able to go into that place of trance, to bypass your conscious mind and maybe get some information from yourself or experience or sensations that help you to move further along the line of understanding of what you want to do with this. And this is also helpful when a person is not sure they actually have a problem or not, but to be able to gather enough information and even stories that they tell that might be woven into the hypnosis. And of course, we've talked about this before. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just create a script and use that with everybody? But it doesn't work like that, because it is that individual. And inevitably, that spanning the life of a person is that there's reason to go back to childhood, and even to go back to a time where there wasn't even a thought about whatever substance it is. And what was that life like, and what did you see, and what did you experience? And then, I mean, even you could call it an age regression, and then to help to bring them forward to today is one of the possibilities of working with the person hypnotically. The and I know, Jan, that you absolutely love, like, list 8 strategies that you might like to think about, because you have that kind of scientific mind of creating potential protocols of directions that you might head. And all of that is gathered, as Roxy says, in the beginning, when you're having a good conversation with them, and you're learning who they are, they're learning who you are, and so that you can then that they know that you wish the best for them, and that you're there and they can trust, and so that they can go into the depths of themselves and maybe discover some things that they really didn't realize. And a lot of times what happens is people don't realize the depth of disturbance they have inside themselves as a result of this silly substance. And I use the word silly because that's a lot of times the way that they perceive it. It's like, what, that this shot of whiskey is ruling my life and I'm paying for it. That you get this kind of response from people, and I consider it just really interesting. So hypnotically, in going with that wave nature of consciousness, when a person is going into the depths of helping them and guiding them to go into the greatest depths that they can, and simply wonder what's going to come next.
When you said about the wave nature of consciousness, I remind myself that once I was talking to Dr. Ernest Rossi, and he actually outlined to me basic rest activity cycle related theory of addiction. Maybe you would like to talk some more about that and do some highlights here. What would you say?
Oh, sure. that when you go into the wave nature of consciousness, and when you look at it from a chronobiological perspective, so in a chronological perspective, biological perspective, is that there's these basic units of work throughout the day and night, and they're an hour and a half or two, sometimes they can be 3 hours long, this sort of thing. And so when you go into the stage of what is the question, that's really interesting. But when you go into the stage two of well, how do I figure this out? It's this wrestling match. It's these, a lot of times high emotions that Jung would call it the dark night of the soul. We're talking about genuine difficulty. And sometimes what people, they forget to have courage in that. And particularly when they're vulnerable later in the day, like in the evenings and things. And they just don't want to go there. They want to avoid it. They want to just blot it out. And that's when there's really the most likelihood of reaching for some kind of substance in not wanting to go there. But then when that happens, that in the natural, it's the wave nature of consciousness, is up and down, but there's a trajectory that goes up, and then there's a trajectory that goes down. And so on both the upside and the downside, that people have a little bit more vulnerability. And so when there's something to reach that's beyond, of when there's the courage to be able to stay with whatever it is that is difficult and not put it off till tomorrow or the next day or next year or your next life, for instance, depending on how you think about these things. When you have the opportunity to face it, what might happen is relief. And the kind of relief that you can get from the inside of yourself, substance free, it is worth more than 50 cases of champagne, for instance. And so when people can be able to get the answers from within, and the hope from within, and the resolutions from within, and the satisfaction from within, it's very satisfying when you solve a perplexing problem. And so in being able to promote that. Now, I don't know exactly what Ernest said when he was talking about the wave nature and addictions, but this is the way that I see it. How close did I get, Jan?
Pretty close, yes. I would say very accurate. Yes. Well. What he told me was that he told me that in regard to the basic rest activity cycle and the consequences of people not actually respecting the nature of the wave nature of consciousness, and so disrespecting or disregarding the fact that they need a 20-minute break now and then. And when they don't do the breaks, the 20-minute breaks every now and then, every hour and a half or two, as he said.
Malfunction junction. That's exactly how he called it. The malfunction junction is that if you get too tired and too stressed because you haven't taken your breaks, you bottom out.
Exactly. And so another thing is that people sometimes misinterpret the need for a break for the need to take whatever they prefer. He told me that in regard to smoking, I believe, so that many people, when they smoke every hour and a half or two, and that serves a purpose of raising up the energy level that they have.
Focus of attention.
Yeah, because naturally, yes, that's what you said in the episode on smoking. So because the energy curve naturally goes down at that moment, then it goes up, but people want to make it higher, so they use the substances and to do it. And that was the Ultradian theory of addiction. That's
Yes. When you push through, you are going to be exhausted. And I remember that I always liked that term, malfunction junction. It's like if you want to go into malfunction and fill in the blank, overeat, overdrink, take drugs, do this, do that, that it's in response to, as I think Roxy had spoken in our last episode, of the good judgment goes out the window.
Yeah.
And so that respecting that you really do need breaks. And but this is along the lines of, how do you avoid addiction? It's that the hypnosis with addiction, it's like a little bit different, but I'm glad you brought this up, because I want people to avoid addiction. I think we're put on this earth to be happy. We just have to figure out how. And my goal as an adult is to laugh as much and as often as I did as a child. And you can only do that if you can take a break. If you're constantly muscling on through something, making it happen, spending hours and hours and hours, and you forget to have fun, you forget to smile, you forget to give and receive a hug. See, now I'm like perseverating on the term malfunction junction. I'm going to be like this for the rest of the day. But yes.
And that brings us back to my, introductory interview is what is the substance doing for you? Is, as you said, it's giving you a break, or it's giving you a focus of attention, or it's relieving you from having to power through so consistent. So using, thinking in advance and respecting your need for breaks is the preventative way of avoiding getting into conundrums like this. But going back to that larger question of where does hypnosis fit in the treatment of addictions? And one of the things that can be done, there is two ways that I use it. One of them is in the mental rehearsals. Think of yourself, you overcome your alcoholism, you want to go back to your work and in a restaurant or as a bartender or something like that. Are you going to be able to manage it? And using that, the hypnosis imagery as a mental rehearsal can provoke and bring up all the potential stressors without having to go through the problems, which it's very effective in that way. But one of the other ways that I use hypnosis is, now having gathered all, what does this substance, what do you like about it? What do you consider the best parts? Using the hypnotic trance state, and I usually use a formal trance state, but using it as an exploratory, well, how can you get those needs met? In what other direction and what other opportunities can you find your way into getting those needs that you're leaving behind met? And in approaching it like that, I'm reinforcing that the substance is being left behind and that there is movement to a future that does not include the substance. The need still exists, the desire, the pleasures can still be enjoyed, but it becomes a process of discovery. So taking that journey, or setting up the stage so that the client can make those discoveries in their own way and can anticipate, can expect, can explore the possibilities, can evaluate, can self-reflect, and do all those important things in the process of moving along.
So mental rehearsals and also thinking of ways or projecting ways of meeting the important needs standing behind the addiction in more adaptive or healthier ways.
Beautifully expressed.
Exactly.
And I also want to add that I can be pretty brutal as a therapist. And if they tell me, oh, the first time, I used the PCB and I felt so sick and scared and everything, and then I got to and it was so wonderful. I don't forget that they tell me that the first time was a really ugly experience. And so then I experience curiosity and I work that in the, I work it in the self-reflections, I work it in the, I'm not going to forget that there was some negatives. I'm going to reinforce that, that if you're going in that direction, you are taking a risk that those negatives can rise up again.
That's brilliant, because of course, when your body is telling you something so strongly that it doesn't want it, then this is a time in hypnosis to go back to that moment.
Exactly.
And to really re-experience that moment and what it was, and particularly in light of what you want for today, and what you want and what you don't want. And certainly one of the statements that can be made is, I can't believe I ever brought this forward in my life after this first experience was so miserable. And that to be able to develop confidence in that, you knew right away where you wanted to put this in your life. I wonder what else you need to listen to, because of the brilliance that you have, this genius that you have of knowing what to do early on. And what is it that interferes with you to listen to your own genius? So it's actually cruel and kind at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking that maybe in those kinds of treatments, you probably need to be cruel and kind at the same time, because there are those aspects all the time. Probably.
Well, people are afraid to go back and to face their own truth. This is like what stage 2 is all about, is having the courage to stay with it long enough that it might want to transform. And so it's and we do go through difficult things really 12 times a day, and how amazingly successful we are given that of how we can be positive, how we can move forward. And this is where self-reflection comes to play. And this is also where the therapist comes into play, to be able to recognize the best in this person, the genius in this person, the fact that this is just a temporary time where you've taken leave of your good judgment, but your good judgment is there. And how satisfying it is to have good judgment, and that literally you can take comfort in being able to accept that in yourself.
Yeah. By the way, when you say about all these things and moving people back to those experiences and all those things, reminded myself of few instances when I was treating mostly alcohol abuse. And I just to mention that I also use progression from time to time to do it. Because what I discovered is that people, when they actually think about drinking and in the way that makes them want to do it, they generally what they do, they create too short of a movie from it. So what they do, they project themselves as having fun and that's it. And then so what I did when I a few times were able to work with that kind of people, I would put them into a trance and I go to that situation and they would describe to me how great it is, and then I go, let's go further with that. And they go, why? And I say, because I believe that your problem partly lies in the fact that this movie is too short. And then so I go, let's go further. And then they go, well, I drink more. And then I go, and then what happens? And then they go, then it gets dizzy. And then I go, and then what happens? And then they goes, well, now I don't remember. And then I go, and then what happens? I wake up in the morning, totally wasted, with all those symptoms of hangover and everything. And I go really deep into that. Let your unconscious move around that so that you can really remember that very deeply, firmly. And then what happens? And so, we create that kind of vision that is a bit longer. And I'm telling that because it's actually kind of, it's an interesting way of actually utilizing progression to do the same thing as you can do with the regression. And I noticed that it helped some people to actually, gain more distance to drinking.
I love it. That's great. I think that we've stimulated a lot of thinking for therapists in the use of hypnosis. And once again, we three have appreciate each other completely, and we have these different ways of working. And what's really good about these podcasts is that those that are listening hopefully are stimulated into, well, what would I do? And for those that are kind of new, it's like, well, I think I'll try out, what Roxanna is talking about. I really relate to that of what Roxanna is talking about. Oh, but I'm going to add what Jan is talking about in those certain circumstances. And I'm also really interested in, in what Catherine has to say. And within the context of that, the individual therapist can describe, or it can evolve of how you feel the most comfortable working, and while continuing to have an open mind.
And so using that opportunity, I'll just say to anyone that's listening, if you would like to share something or would like to give us a comment or share any knowledge or any inspirations or anything else for that matter that comes to your mind, just leave us a comment under this movie or send us an email to any email that we possess, right? Okay, so thank you very much for today's podcast and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
This was another episode of our Experiencing Consciousness podcast. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jan. You're the best. Be well, be happy, celebrate life.